Halleck, and this is a special live episode of Dispatches. Over the past several days, sectarian death squads have carried out massacres across Syria, slaughtering more than 1,000 people, mostly Alawites and some Christians, on the Syrian coast in Latakia and Tartus. These death squads are technically led by none other than Mohammed al-Jalani, now known as Ahmed al-Sharaa, the former leader of Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria and the now president of Syria. Yet Western media is whitewashing these massacres, calling them revenge against pro-Assad remnants. But let's be clear, this is sectarian cleansing carried out by Salafi jihadists who now control Syria and openly target minorities. Yes, there have been clashes, but those came after months of targeted killings, kidnappings, and lootings. And let's also remember, this was predictable. Those of us who warned that Western-backed regime change in Syria would descend into a sectarian bloodbath were dismissed as Assadists. We said handing the country over to sectarian death squads would lead to massacres just like this. Now that this exact outcome has come to fruition, many voices in the media and at the think tanks want to either ignore it, justify it, or pretend it isn't happening. So what's really taking place on the ground? And what does this mean for the future of Syria? The Israelis and Americans have long had a vision of balkanizing the country, carving it up into sectarian enclaves. And this situation unfolding in the coast of Syria aligns with that goal in some ways. Is Syria as a unified state even possible anymore? What does this mean for the ability of Alawites, Druze, Christians, Sunnis, Shias, and Kurds to live together in a single country? And could this violence spill over into Lebanon and Iraq? Here to break it all down is Elijah Magnier, a war correspondent with decades of experience covering conflicts across the Middle East. But before we dive in, a quick reminder. Independent media like Dispatches here at Breakthrough News relies on your support to continue exposing the truth. If you like what we do, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/breakthroughnews, or you can make a one-time donation in the live chat. Every little bit helps us keep bringing you the stories that mainstream outlets ignore. Now let's get into it. Elijah, welcome back to Dispatches.
Hello, Rania. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's really a pleasure to have you on to talk about this very, very important issue. Before I do get into it, I just want to remind people to make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Smash that like button, you guys. It helps boost us in the algorithm. So, Elijah, to get to what's taking place in Syria, the media is framing these massacres that we're seeing on the coast of Syria as revenge against pro-Assad remnants. But the scale and the brutality of what's happening, which we can all see for ourselves in the plethora of videos the people committing them have put online, it suggests something much deeper and ideological. The perpetrators, very clearly in their rhetoric, see Alawites as inherently guilty. They're associating them all with the former government of Bashar al-Assad, and they're to some degree targeting Christians too, though not as much. So can you explain what's driving these massacres? How much of this is sectarian doctrine or perhaps political opportunism, or are they really just going after regime remnants?
You've raised many important points here that needs to be highlighted. First of all, Assad has supporters in Syria after so many years of the ruling of his father and him after the father. However, the fast fall of Bashar al-Assad indicates that he did no longer enjoy the support of the population and of the army, at least the majority, because we have seen how the Alawite, that are more than 4.5 million in Syria, did not stand to Assad and did not support him. Therefore, it is very wrong to say that these are the remnant of Assad that are in Latakia, Tartus, Jabli, Banyas, etc., because there were so many people of this region, Alawite and others, who were killed, and they support Ahmed al-Sharaa. They support the change of the regime in Syria. They don't stand with Assad because Assad had a kind of a family around him, and those who benefited of him, those who were in the Ba'ath Party and those who were supportive of Assad. But for so many years, people supported not only Assad, but stood against Ahmad al-Shara or Abu Muhammad al-Jolani and against ISIS. This is why the choice for so many years was not of Assad, but was against the Takfiri, Al-Qaeda and ISIS who were killing people. And I remember an interview done by Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, who is Ahmad al-Shara, the de facto president, self-appointed president of Syria today, when with Al Jazeera, he said that the Alawites are to be killed. They are not Muslims and they are to be eliminated. So this is the ideology that exists. Now, people can argue that Ahmad al-Shara started a new beginning for Syria, wanted to reconcile with all the Syrians. So let's assume that is right. Why did he wait for 3 days of massacres to stand up and then appoint a committee of investigation to check what happened in Latakia and on the west coast of Syria? Therefore, he is fully aware of the massacres that took place in the first day, where thousands of cars came from all over Syria, from Aleppo, from Damascus, from Daraa, from Homs, from Hama, and they all went to the coastal area of Syria, and they started their slogan, but we're going to kill the Alawite. So therefore, the remnant version is just a tool to justify the killing of the Syrian Alawite, but not enough, because even the current authority in Syria recognized the killing of civilians. People came out on social media saying, we support you. But an Alawite came out and said, I've lost 15 members of my family and friend, and we still support you, but you need to investigate. Now, how can he investigate if he's the one who allowed this killing for 3 days for over 1,000 people? The numbers we don't know because they're not exact, because we don't have the information, but at least there were several hundred people killed. There were civilians, there were children, there were women, there were elderly, there were people who were taken out of their homes. So yes, there is a strong ideological motivation against the Shia and the Alawite, who did not stand with Bashar al-Assad in the last 2 weeks after the attack of Aleppo that started, and did not hold the ground, did not defend Assad. So therefore, we cannot say, well, okay, there are 4.5 million people in Syria that needs to be killed. However, why this is justified and the international community is really not pausing on what happened in Syria is because they consider the Alawite as a base that can support the return of Iran to Syria. This is why we have seen immediately after this massacre that Ahmad al-Shara signing a deal with the Kurds to divert the attention away. That was yesterday. The deal was on the table for the last month and a half. Why accelerating so much the reconciliation and to give another image for people to forget what he has done in Latakia and Banias and Jable and Tartus and all the coastal area. And then today he agreed with the Druze in Suwaida to raise the flag and made some kind of arrangement. There is no signed deal yet, but he made an arrangement just to show that he is really not a sectarian person. But that is not enough to forget about what happened on the coast of Syria and the type of ideology that Ahmad al-Shara, who was an ISIS emir in Nineveh, Iraq, and then became the representative of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in Syria, and he switched to become the Al-Qaeda emir in Bilad al-Sham, and then he switched to become a supporter of Turkey. Therefore, the ideology is still there. The foreign fighters are still there who were giving leadership in Syria to lead the security apparatus, to lead the defense ministry. They are there. They are Tunisian. They are Chechen. They are Moroccan. They are all kind of nationalities that are still within this organization that choose to fight under Ahmed al-Shara and remain in Syria. And this is what this ideology that was revealed in the last days.
So I want to elaborate. I want you to elaborate a bit on that because, when it comes to a figure like Ahmed al-Shara, and I do encourage people to go check out the episode that I did with you on Dispatches from back in December, just after Assad fell, and Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as Mohammed al-Jalani, took over. You did a pretty good deep dive into his career, if you will, going and joining Al-Qaeda in Iraq, coming back and being an, deputy ISIS emir in Syria, and then starting al-Nusra, Al-Qaeda in Syria, then his role in HTS, and now as the president of Syria. So that's his life trajectory. I'm curious, how involved is Ahmed al-Shara in these killings? Is he, I don't know if you necessarily have an answer to this, but do you suspect, is he actively directing these HTS massacres, or does he actually lack control over them? I mean, either of those scenarios does not bode well. And his public statements don't match what's happening on the ground, because he's talking and been talking for the last 4 months about unity, while also presiding over a situation where, before these massacres, there was these sporadic killings by people calling themselves HTS in the countryside of Homs on the coast. And people were reporting it to HTS and they were saying, it's not us. And Ahmed al-Shara was like, washing his hands of it and saying, it's not me, it's not us. These are just random acts of revenge and violence. But while talking about unity and that this is just, what's to be expected, I think were some of the words he used about these recent massacres in a transitional period. And then, starting this investigative committee to look into it. From what I understand from people speaking to who are there, some of these killings are still taking place as he's saying they're over. So I guess to go back to my original question, is he directing this? Is this organized from the top? Or are these people he does not have control over, but maybe he's okay with it?
I don't think he doesn't have the control. On the contrary, the people he has appointed are all from HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The Minister of Defense, the Minister of Internal Security, the intelligence services, they all are his men. That's one. Let's examine the facts only. Secondly, it took him 3 days. On the day 4, he came out and said there were some misconduct. This is what he said. He never said massacre. He never said people were killed. He said there were some misconduct by people who are part of the security apparatus and who have been arrested, and others who came to support the security apparatus. Now, if we examine what happened on day 1, when several positions, police posts on the coast were attacked. Now, if there are dozens or hundreds even who were killed, because at the end of the day, the total, according to HTS, were 182 members of the security apparatus that were killed. Now, he has conquered Aleppo and then Homs and Hama and Damascus in just a couple of weeks. He has enough men to rely on his own men only, and who are disciplined, and send them to establish order in the area. If that is his objective, then we understand that he allowed people to go. And most probably, he could have instructed them to teach the Alawite a lesson, but to teach the rest of Syria a lesson. But this is something that he forgot, that this kind of lesson increased the hate of people. He called a journalist, an Alawite journalist, a woman who was expelled by Assad and who ran away from Syria because she stood against Assad. And 3 of her brothers were killed. And he called her and present his condolences very briefly, according to the story she has delivered. Now, she is anti-Assad. We can't say these are the remnant of Assad. Why this has been done? Because first, he is the person in charge. We don't need to dig into who gave the orders because he is the one who lead the country. Secondly, his people are in charge. So people who are very faithful to him that are responsible. Third, he has enough power and men to be able to control the area, particularly when the Alawites are not one sect and one group all against him, because had that been the case, he would have never controlled the area. Because we're talking about more than 4.5 million Alawites. He doesn't have enough men to control half of them, or even a quarter, or even 10% of these 4 million, 4.5 million. Therefore, we understand that this is not by fear that he can control. On the contrary, he's creating a base that other will capitalize on to regain the attack on his authority. Now, we also see that people are not very happy with him because he changed from an ideological person to someone who wants to be in good terms with the Americans, with the Europeans, with the Kurds, with the Turk, with Israel, with everybody, but not Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Qatar. This kind of balance is extremely difficult to manage when he has announced himself as a president, so he doesn't have the population legitimacy. Secondly, he is the one who appointed the whole government. He is the one who is appointing committees. He's the one who appointing committees also for the domestic dialogue among all the various parties in Syria, and he's the one who declared that this situation will remain under his control for the next 4 years. So it is extremely difficult to give him a way out and say he did not instruct or he is not directly responsible for what has happened.
So, in that sense, I also wanted to ask about the issue of the foreign fighters in HTS who are, I don't know if they've been naturalized or they've been given the option to naturalize to become Syrians. And these are people from all over. You mentioned Tunisia, there's some from Chechnya, there's some from Uzbekistan, there's Uyghurs. There's quite a collection. And they don't make up all of HTS, but they certainly make up some of its militias. And so there has been an attempt to frame this or the, door-to-door killings that we heard about, because there was, the entrance into villages where HTS guys went door to door and executed entire families. There are attempts or have been attempts to frame this as these are just the foreign fighters, not Syrians doing it, which is probably true. There are probably some foreign fighters doing it, but there's also Syrian HTS guys doing it as well. But I guess my question here is, are there factions within HTS with different agendas, and could that at some point spiral into an internal power struggle, or is that a narrative that just is convenient to defend Ahmed al-Sharaa with, to say, oh, he has to, cater to the extremists as well as the rest of the country, or else there could be mayhem?
That's a good question. If I may expand a little bit, a bit of background that is important. It is part of my specialty as terrorism and counterterrorism. So the ideology of ISIS and Al-Qaeda is very similar. The struggle was only about the power. And they both agreed to fight against the near enemy. And we're talking about the Shia or the Sunni even, who do not agree with their ideology, and not the far enemy, as Al-Qaeda decided outside Syria to fight America. And only in Iraq and Syria, the Al-Qaeda under Zarqawi and later on under Abu Mohammed al-Jolani decided not to fight only the Americans, because Zarqawi fought against the Americans, but also against the Shia and the security forces in Iraq. Now, the same mentality, Abu Mohammed al-Jolani came with the blessing of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi to Syria to form the base of ISIS. When he disagreed with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi over the power, because Baghdadi asked him to give up on the leadership and to merge Jabhat al-Nusra with ISIS. So he chose to follow Sheikh Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of Al-Qaeda after the killing of Osama bin Laden. Now, what al-Zawahiri did, he called upon all the jihadists around the world to join Bilad al-Sham, because Bilad al-Sham, the Levant, is extremely important for the caliphate and the creation of the caliphate. We're talking about more than 1,400 years ago, and the rebirth of the caliphate in Bilad al-Sham, and this is where the Umayyah were established, is important. Now, when Abu Muhammad Jilani shifted and went to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, he went to another group, but similar to the nomination. This is where the hardcore Al-Qaeda created a group called Huras al-Din, the protectors of the religion. Now, just for you to know that a large number of Al-Qaeda remain under al-Shara, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani control. There are people who think they need to reach tamkeen, which means that they need to consolidate their power and their grip over the country before they move to something else. Now, it is true that many people do not agree with that, but others within the ideology agree to be faithful to the ruler, even if he's wrong. That's in the Salafist ideology that it exists. And just also to remind the audience that only a few days ago, America declared that it has assassinated in Syria one of Al-Qaeda leaders that is wanted on the American list, that is part of Huras al-Din, under the protection of Abu Muhammad Jolani, that is Ahmad al-Shara. Therefore, these groups are still there. What are they doing there? Under his control, but they are Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda is not far from the same ideology of all the foreign fighters that are there. Now, it could be that these foreign fighters have decided, some of them to join Ahmad al-Shara, which is a reality, and others decided to keep on the side but not act against him. Are they going to turn their guns against Ahmad al-Shara? Maybe, if they see him drifting away from religion. That is a possibility. Nevertheless, for now, he is the one in control. Now, watch it. We're not talking about a few hundred or few thousand in Syria, excluding the Kurdish area. Yesterday's deal was included the control of the new Syrian Authority of all the jails that are under the Kurdish control. And we're talking about more than 10,000 of ISIS members and family members who are there. And we know that all these groups, when they are in one jail, it's exactly a copy of what happened in Buka in Iraq, that the Americans called the Jihadi University. This is where the Jihadi become harder in their ideology, more bitter and more determined to inflict pain on the people who put them in jail or who cause to be locked in the area for so many years. And what are these people going to do? Is he going to release them and say you are pardoned, as he pardoned everyone in all the jail in Syria, even the criminals or members of ISIS or members of Al-Qaeda? We don't know. So we're not dealing only with Al-Qaeda and the Huras al-Din and the ideology of HTS, because there are other groups like Ahrar al-Sham who have also foreign fighters among their men, and they are supporting HTS in his ruling. So there are many foreign fighters in Syria. What's going to happen to these? They have been given a Syrian nationality and they can move freely in Syria. How Ahmad Shara is going to deal with the people? So far, we don't have any visibility.
So I want to get to the fate of minorities in Syria and some of the regional potential influences and spillover. But before we talk about that, I thought there was a really interesting response from the United States to what was happening in Syria. You had this kind of duplicity of the US on display because Secretary of State Marco Rubio released this statement essentially portraying himself as some sort of like defender of minorities in Syria. And excuse me, it's been quite interesting to watch because Marco Rubio was one of the biggest cheerleaders of the collection of sectarian Al-Qaeda style groups that the US and various Gulf states and others were backing in Syria to overthrow Assad over the years. So to see him come out and condemn these massacres was a bit odd, but interesting. You also, the Trump administration seems very reluctant to lift any sanctions on the current government in Syria. As long as Ahmed al-Sharaa is in charge, they see him as the former head of Al-Qaeda, which he is. You have someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who is now director of national intelligence, and she had very strong opinions on Al-Qaeda's role in Syria and on Mohammed al-Jalani / Ahmed al-Sharaa. And she was very vocal in that opposition up until her confirmation hearing a couple months ago. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the current U.S. policy on Syria, the sort of duplicity of that, given the U.S.'s role in causing this in many ways, but what we might see moving forward? I mean, if the U.S. doesn't remove sanctions from Syria, isn't Syria kind of screwed?
Well, if we look at what happened yesterday between the Kurds and Ahmed al-Sharaa and the signing of the deal, it cannot happen without the support of the US. Therefore, we understand that the Americans are on board. They're supporting him. They're supporting Ahmed al-Sharaa, regardless of what they are saying, because we know that the Americans are extremely pragmatic. So they met with Hamas, that is considered, according to them, as a terrorist organization, to the dislike and disapproval of the Israelis. And they've been meeting Ahmed al-Sharaa in Idlib since 2020. And there were delegations from the British intelligence services, from the German, from the French, and from the Americans who met with Ahmed al-Sharaa. I mean, it's not surprising because the Americans even sent a delegation to Damascus airport in 2015, 2016, and met with the Syrian intelligence services of Bashar al-Assad at that time. Therefore, the position of the Americans, what they are saying and what they are doing is completely different, because they can say that this is what we consider because they want more concessions from Ahmed al-Sharaa. The mere fact that they've sent the Kurds to sign the deal that they've been working on for the last month and a half, it means that they are on board. Now, because the Russians don't have an easy stay in Syria, because Ahmed al-Sharaa is considering that the Russian have to compensate the Syrian for what has been done during the years, and the Russian were extremely hard on Idlib and on all the HTS members and militants since between 2015 and 2024, just a week before the fall of Assad, that were bombing the advance of HTS. So the Russian wants their base to be kept. They're negotiating the loan, they're negotiating the debts, but the Americans are happy that HTS is not expressing itself against Israel. It's happy to see Israeli journalists in Damascus revealing their identity. They don't need to conceal it. They don't need to hide the fact that they work for an Israeli newspaper or media and they carry an Israeli passport. And they are not confronting the Israeli in the south. On the contrary, every time Israel bombed a Syrian facility, the current authority announced that this belonged to the remnant of the Syrian army, like it doesn't belong to them. And what the Israelis did is they've destroyed all the Syrian capabilities, strategic weapons, navy, artillery, the manufacturing of weapons and missiles. Syria is very advanced in this domain. This is why the no reaction of the Israelis who are seen in the market in Sueda and Dara buying bread and buying their making their shopping with their weapons among the population, paying money normally they are at home. This is something that the Americans are very happy with. Now, what is the objective of the Americans in this case? If I look at what they have done with the Kurds, creating this rapprochement that is going to take, according to the deal, a year until the end of the year. It might take longer because there are many points that need to be sorted out. The Americans will have no objection to really imitate exactly the same situation as in Kurdistan. They can have military bases where, under the protection of the Kurds, because the Kurds of the democratic militant will remain as the de facto forces under the control of the central government, like the Peshmerga in Iraq, exactly the same, where they receive their salaries from the central government, but their orders from the Kurdish leader Masoud Barzani in Iraq. And here we're talking about the Kurdish leader Abdi, the General Abdi, that he is the one who's going to continue being the person, the de facto responsible of a third of Syria. They will agree, like in Iraq, on a share of the oil, on a share of the agriculture. They already discussed about it. The Kurds wanted to share 50%. The Damascus said no, but they postponed that to further discussion. All that under the control of the Americans, who control the oil. Now, we know that Donald Trump said he doesn't want to be in Syria. He doesn't want to keep controlling Syria. But he never said, I don't want to have military bases in Syria. And he never said that I can have another contract like the SOFA agreement in Iraq. He can have a similar contract with the Syrians, with Ahmad al-Shara, where the presence of the Americans will be legitimized. Now, of course, Turkey also agreed, and Turkey is not very happy because Turkey wanted to get rid of the Kurds militants. But again, Turkey can be pragmatic. And what Turkey did yesterday, this is something people omitted, and it's very important to mention. Immediately after the signing of the deal, a few hours after that, Turkey was bombing the Tishreen Dam in the area controlled under the Kurds, saying that Turkey is adopting exactly the same Israeli method and a rule of engagement in bombing any objective that they can see. Israel is doing that in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Syria, and now Turkey can do that also in Syria. Now, apart from the Adana agreement that allows Turkey to interfere whenever there is a danger against its national security, but Turkey can take it even further and attack any target anytime it sees fit.
So I wanna dig in a bit to the issue of the minorities in Syria. I also just want to say very quickly, this issue of Assad remnants, that both the Israelis and HTS and Ahmed al-Shara keep saying to justify whether it's attacks by the Israelis on these, Assad remnant military bases or military equipment, or in the case of HTS and Ahmed al-Shara, saying that what's taking place on the coast is a military campaign against quote unquote Assad remnants. To me, that just sounds like the Israelis saying we're attacking Hamas in Gaza and that giving them carte blanche to just kill Palestinians in mass in Gaza. Not that dissimilar. But I want to ask you, what do these massacres mean for the survival of Syria's minority communities, whether we're talking about the Alawites, Christians, Ismailis, Druze? You talked a bit about the Kurds already, which there's, a rapprochement that is maybe taking place now. We'll see how that goes. But there's also Armenians, Circassians. Like, Syria is a very pluralistic, diverse place. And obviously, the Alawites are hated the most by figures in HTS for very ideological reasons. But they also don't like the others as well. I know there's some, we can maybe get into the Druze separately because there's some stuff happening there that's specifically related to them. But all that being said, Elijah, I've seen people coming, there's been people fleeing Syria to Lebanon, mostly Alawites and Christians, not knowing if they have a place in a future Syria because this is terrifying for them. So, yeah, what is the fate of Syria's minorities and its plurality moving forward?
Ahmad al-Shara, we need to say, he's a very clever man. What he did is he went to the Kurds and he went to the Druze, because the Druze have the protection of Israel and the Kurds have the protection of the Americans. And he went to both sides saying, look, I want to unite Syria. I have a very legitimate and straightforward dialogue to unite the country and unite all the minorities, and I am not against the minorities. Because the Alawites can be linked to Iran. And that is something that is beautiful music to the ears of the Israelis and the Americans, and even Turkey, because Turkey really stabbed Iran by kicking Iran out. And before that, Russia did also its contribution in relation to the benefit and the national security of Israel in the first place, but not where what Turkey did was against Russia and Iran. However, Russia was already elbowing Iran out because of Israel only, for the benefit of Israel. Therefore, we see that the Alawites are on their own. The only people who can, external power, who can support the Alawite here is Iran. And Iran is not welcomed in Syria, where everybody is happy to see Iran out. Turkey, Russia, America, and Israel, and Saudi Arabia, of course, the Emirates, everybody is happy to see Iran out. This is why it is easy to kill the Alawite. This is why it's easy to show that Ahmad Shara is meeting with the Christians and with meeting with the other minorities. All these minorities, they are a small minority. They will end up leaving the country because they don't feel safe. But we're not talking about the Kurds and the Druze, because they have their back supported and sustained by, as I said, Israel and the United States in the north and in the south. This is why the weakest link here are the Alawite. What's going to happen to the Alawite? When Assad fell, there were around 80,000 Alawite who ran away and escaped to Lebanon. In this attack, there are 7,000 who left to Lebanon. So there is a gathering of Alawite community in Lebanon that is increasing, and they will most probably join also the Alawite in Tripoli, because there is already an Alawite community, Lebanese Alawite community in Tripoli. So the presence of these people is not going to be good news for Syria in the future, or for the Americans, or for the Israelis, because these people have lost everything. They escaped their homes and they had to run away. Now, we did not hear Ahmad Shara asking these people to return. We hear him saying yesterday, with the signing of the agreement with the Kurds, asking all the return of refugee. And he was talking about, without mentioning it, the area of Afrin that the Kurds escaped when his people, HTS, invaded the Kurdish area along the coast and very close to the coastal area of the Alawite. And these people ran away and escaped to Al-Hasaka and Kamishli. And this is where they have established themselves. They've lost their home. They have to recover that within this year. This is what HTS promised, or Ahmad Shara promised, in this deal with Mazloum Abdi, the Kurdish general. Now, this is why we see everybody is prepared to give concessions. With the Druze, they were giving the possibility to have their own security forces, their own policemen appointed by their own people, not the government, because the governor is something different. It needs to be an outsider to be able to strike a balance, but then the member of the municipality will be all of the area. They will be Druze. Therefore, they are under control. They are strong. They feel they can retain their weapons under different forms. The Kurds will retain their weapons under another form, even if there is a big title that will join the Syrian government, exactly like the example I gave of the Peshmerga in Iraq. So, but the Alawites are on their own.
And I mean, you could also say that Bashar al-Assad had a lot to do with that, in the sense that, they don't really have a leadership. He didn't really let a leadership among the Alawites flourish because he made himself the leader. And they are pretty much on their own, and it's horrible to witness, because I mean, this is just the level of persecution is so insane. Just horrifying, depraved, sadistic, the kinds of videos I'm seeing. But, Elijah, I also wanted to ask you, this is happening in the context of some ambushes against HTS. There have been clashes taking place. So it's, Ahmed al-Sharaa is calling it Assad regime remnants. I wouldn't use that phrasing at all, but all that's to say there are people who decided to fire at HTS checkpoints, or however this started. So I'm just curious, do you have any understanding of who or how or where those ambushes came from? Ahmed al-Shara's narrative is that Iran, Hezbollah, and Russia are responsible for arming, regime remnants. But I don't think that's what's happening here.
Okay, well, it's important to say here that Bashar al-Assad relied mainly on the Alawites that were close to him, as he relied on the majority Sunni that were close to him. 70% of Syria are Sunni. Bashar al-Assad was not fighting with hundreds of thousands of men who are Alawite. The majority were Sunni. So he had Sunni and Alawite faithful to him, as he had Christian faithful to him. But with his fall, and because he left the country in this way, because the army did not want to fight, and the army is made of all the officers that were faithful to Bashar al-Assad, and he dropped him, and they stopped and they refused to fight. So he left without leaving a message or addressing the people or telling what happened to him and why he took this decision. For that, are the HTS going to go after the 70% of Sunni who supported Bashar al-Assad? Are these can be called remnant of Assad or not? If there are remnant of Assad, everyone who supported Assad since 2011 are remnant of Assad. But this is not the way to run a country. This is not the way to call for unity. To call for unity, it means like the de-Baathification in Iraq that failed tremendously because everyone had a membership of a Baath party in Iraq. Exactly the same in Syria. If you want to have a job, exactly in Turkey. Today you have to be of Erdogan party to have a job. It's the same. The Alawite in Turkey are marginalized again. The beginning of the Erdogan party united everybody from all walks of life. The nationalists, the communists, the Alawite, the Sunni, everybody was inside. The seculars. But then slowly but surely, Erdogan remained with his own party on its own, his own. And he has excluded the Alawite. Well, they are the black sheep of Turkey and Syria. And they not in Lebanon. And this is where they are creating a strong base. Now, is it in the advantage of Iran to support the Alawite? Well, it is in the Iranian constitution, Article 152, 153, that Iran will support all the oppressed people around the world. This is why Iran supported the Lebanese resistance. This is why Iran supported Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. Sunni or Shia, doesn't matter. Iran supported Iraq and supported in the first place Masoud Barzani in Kurdistan against ISIS, because Masoud Barzani asked the support for Iran when America did not offer the support. Now, if the Alawite will ask the support for Iran, Iran will help them, of course, because if this is the way Ahmed al-Sharaa is dealing with the Alawite and the international community is ignoring them and not talking about the massacre, and also condemning them for in a few words. But then Brussels is inviting Ahmed Shara on the 19th of this month for the conference of the donors. That is double standard that will have a very fertile ground for Iran to step in. But it doesn't mean Iran is going to control Syria or regain the control of Syria. But Iran will defend the Alawite if the Alawite will ask for the Iranian support. Until now, Hezbollah did not interfere in Syria. It took a very clear stand that this is not the territory that we're going to be active. They've been active in Syria because of the request of the Syrian government in Damascus. Today, Syria is saying to the Hezbollah, you're not allowed to come in, and that's it. They stop there. Now, Iran will find a way to support the Alawite that are in Lebanon who can cross to Syria if these want to continue their struggle and if they are killed without anyone supporting them.
I want to ask you about the spillover effect of this. I mean, you've mentioned Lebanon a bit, and obviously there's been a lot of people, a lot of Syrians fleeing to Lebanon, specifically Syrian Alawites. You also have the Iraqis, not saying so publicly, but at least certain factions in Iraq quite concerned about the support among certain populations in their country for Mohammed al-Jolani. I still don't know what to call him anymore, Ahmed al-Shara, and what that might mean for security, for the security of Iraq. So, you know, you've covered conflicts across the region. You know Lebanon very well, Elijah. You know Iraq very well. So can you talk a bit about the potential for spillover into either of these neighboring countries and what that would mean?
Iraq is extremely worried about what happened in the last days on the coast area. It doesn't mean Iraq is going to interfere. It doesn't mean Iraq is going to send troops or Hashd al-Shabi or the Iraqi resistance going to interfere. All these news on social media are fake news. However, Iraq is extremely worried. Lebanon is extremely worried because we're talking about the same ideology of people who started in 2003 in Iraq, massacring other Iraqi Shia and Christian, and declared war, a religious war, against the Shia and the Christian. That happened in Iraq. It happened in Lebanon when Lebanon started to take measures against the Takfiri. There were car bombs. There were attacks in different places in Lebanon against these Takfiris. We're talking about the same people who are ruling Syria today. Now, one could argue that these people are more matured. And then Ahmed Shara said, well, that when I was very young. Well, he's not that old now. And we're talking about the same ideology that was running in his vein until 2024, before December 2024, when he occupied Syria with the support of other groups that came from the south. And, of course, with the support of Turkey. So we're not talking about someone who has repented or changed the ideology so long ago. He's still in it. We're talking about only a few months. And the example in Latakia and Banyas and Tartus and Jable and Kirdaha and all the area made everybody jump in Lebanon and in Iraq. It's this same people we're talking about that they are saying they have changed and they want to rule a country now. Are they going to behave in the same way once they have enough power? They're very clever to hide their intentions. They're very clever in creating a camouflage, like signing a deal with the Kurds and another deal with the Druze by saying, hey, we are not against the minority and we're signing also against the secular Kurds and the Muslim Druze that are not Sunni, but their belief is considered as heretic by the Sunni Salafists. We're talking about the same Salafists who rule Syria today. Now, I can assure you that the majority of the Syrians do not carry this ideology. The majority of the Syrians who are extremely happy with the fall of Assad are against this ideology. So this is not the concern of only Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon, but also a large part of the Syrians. Now, what's going to happen to Iraq? I've seen the speaker in my recent trip last month to Iraq, and I spoke to a few Iraqi officials about the way they look at Iraq, and they said they're extremely worried. They're reinforcing the power and the forces along the borders. They're tightening more the control of the area in Al-Anbar, in Nineveh, making sure that there are no remnant of supporters of Abu Muhammad al-Jolani when he was in Iraq. I mean, if we look at what happened in Iraq when Abu Muhammad al-Jolani was arrested, he was arrested in 2005 for 4 years because he was considered dangerous. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the emir of ISIS, was arrested for 1 year because he was considered a minor individual with a low level of danger that can cause to the Americans. Abu Muhammad al-Jalani cannot become the emir of Nineveh out of the blue moon just because he is from the Jolan or from the Dara or because he's a Syrian. There were thousands of Syrians who did not reach any level within ISIS, and the Iraqi records are full of them who've been killed or arrested by the authority. But he reached significant levels. Now, if this ideology changed from being an ISIS emir in Iraq to an ISIS emir under the Jabhat al-Nusra in Syria, to Al-Qaeda emir, and then to HTS holding on to Hurras al-Din that are Al-Qaeda, protecting them, offering them a shelter if they interfere or not. And then we see what he has done with the minority Alawite. Then the Iraqis and the Lebanese are on alert. Hezbollah is on alert along the border with Syria, in the Bekaa Valley, in Tripoli, in the north, along the borders. They are directing most of their military effort to that area to make sure that all the Lebanese villages are well protected in case there is an infiltration. Might not happen now, may happen in the future. Ahmed Shara may say after 3 days, as he did with the Alawite, oh, I'm going to appoint a delegation to investigate what happened. And then this delegation will report to the authority. So he might say the same. Are these facts that we are looking at or his words? I don't know.
We have to wait and see, but so far it doesn't, again, bode well. I wanted to ask you about the Israel angle here. I mean, the Israelis have reportedly approved plans for what we've long known the Israelis wanted to do, which is this 3-zone occupation of Syrian territory that reaches just up to Damascus. And, you know, these are different zones that would include permanent military outposts or bases, and maintain just a permanent Israeli military presence. There's plans in this plan for part of Israel's, you know, good neighbor policy, which it implemented a long time ago when it was occupying South Lebanon. But, you know, it's kind of good neighbor 2.0, trying to really they've been trying to cultivate relationships with the minorities in the South, specifically the Druze and Sweda. All that's to say, you know, the Israelis have also been doing this in conjunction with what we've witnessed, which is the bombing of these quote unquote remnants of Assad military machinery. They also have long bombed so-called Iranian targets across Syria. But this courting of minorities in the South with this permanent military occupation presence and just blatant land theft, what is the strategy here? You know, Israel is trying to present itself as a potential protector of minorities from this new regime that it's framing as terroristic and Al-Qaeda. But also it's, again, that duplicity, right? Like with the US, because the Israelis actually played a role in helping them in the South during the peak of the proxy war on Syria. So yeah, what's Israel's angle here, and what do you make of how things are playing out, you know, kind of in Israel's favor?
Well, because the Iranian positions in Syria were bombed for over a year before the fall of Assad, Russia had a position against Iran and against the armament of Assad during the last year and a half even. Because Iran was weakened in Syria, then with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, Israel felt it has the power to destroy anything related to the Syrian strategic weapons without objections. And this is what happened. On the contrary, this is not only what happened, but the Israelis commanders landed in different areas where there were bunkers and there were tunnels under the ground, impossible for the aviation to destroy. And they destroyed all these places and destroyed everything that belongs to Syria that can represent one day a tiny, small danger on the Israeli national security. And keep in mind that Israel is the aggressor and the occupier all the time. And Israel bombarded Syria for over 1,500 times without a reply. I think one or twice Syria has replied only. Therefore, the Israelis feel that they have occupied the whole Golan Heights. They occupied the entire Mount of Hermon, because that was not occupied. Only part of it on the Israeli or Palestine that was occupied. And they have moved into Daraa, Quneitra, and Sueda. They even reach the rural area of Damascus on the south west. And there's nobody who can stop them. The international community is not saying a word. The Americans accept what the Israelis are doing. The Europeans are concerned about what Israel is doing, and that's it. Therefore, for Israel to maintain position in these areas, it is a normal thing to do when Israel believes of the greater Israel. Therefore, the Golan is gone forever until we have generations who want to fight back, but it's not going to happen soon. And their presence on different positions, they've created 8 static, huge military positions in the area, and they have no intention to leave. They took the high ground. They control the area. They control even the area overlooking Hasbaya and Rashaya in Lebanon on the other side. And nobody can stop them. They are at 27 kilometers from Damascus. Nobody can stop them to go to Damascus today. Therefore, they can do whatever they want. There is no international law that can stand, and the current Syrian leadership has no intention to stand against Israel.
Yeah, there was an article or an interview that Ahmed al-Shaddad did with Reuters this week. It came out last night, and in it, he was asked about Israel and the comments from Israeli leaders, and he basically dismissed them as nonsense. That's like the most he's really said about it. He's mostly ignored it. He's busy, I guess, getting rid of Alawites to care about the Israelis occupying a huge chunk of Syria. He really doesn't seem to care. It's utterly shocking. I wanted to ask you about, we've seen reports of so-called Islamic resistance operating inside Syria. I mean, so far we've just seen statements that have been released. It's unclear if this group actually exists or if it does, what it means. Hezbollah's Sheikh Naim Qassem even went so far as to deny any involvement in it, because some people had suspected maybe Hezbollah had something to do with it. But like you said, Hezbollah is completely staying out of this. They've got their own domestic issues to worry about after the devastating war with Israel a few months back. So all that's to say, what do you make of this declared Islamic resistance? And to be clear, this is a group that's basically said they're going to fight Israel. I haven't seen any evidence of that yet, but perhaps it's a foreshadowing of what's to come. Because I mean, at the end of the day, can Israel really occupy other people's land without facing any resistance whatsoever at all? I mean, that's never really happened.
I can tell you, I've seen so many Syrians who stand in support of Bashar and against Bashar al-Assad wholeheartedly, but also against Israel. the Syrians do not agree with the presence of the Israelis in the south. The majority of the Syrians do not stand with Israel. I mean, nobody can stand with this criminal entity that is killing in this way the Palestinians, that is killed the Lebanese in this way, destroyed the south of Lebanon, and destroyed Gaza, and is destroying the West Bank. Nobody stands with Israel in the country that have borders with Israel. Now, are these groups going to grow? Well, Hezbollah started in 1982 with a very small number of people willing to fight Israel, but Israel was inside Lebanon. Here, Israel is on the edge in an area that feels kind of protected with its back. In Lebanon, it did not have the back protected. It was inside Beirut, was inside the street, was inside the villages in the south of Lebanon. We haven't seen this scale of, I hope we can see that similar in Syria, so the Syrian can stand up and fight the Israelis as the Lebanese did in 1982 and 1983 until the year 2000. But for the Israeli to withdraw any soon is not going to happen. It took Israel 18 years to pull out from Lebanon after the departure of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and all the other Palestinian groups. Now, we're not going to see the Israeli leaving, which gives a fertile ground for the resistance to grow and to blossom. Now, yes, I have also seen groups like 313, Uli Ba's, and 313 are the number. It's a number of all the soldiers that are going to follow Imam Mahdi when he appears and he returns, according to the ideology, which indicates who stands behind this group, but it doesn't mean it is Hezbollah. Hezbollah needs every penny to be invested in Lebanon, but Iran can stand with these people if they ask, but they need to prove that they have enough support. They're not one or two or three who are angry and they want to be on the social media, but they really gather and they have an ideology and they have an objective, and the objective to fight against Israel. And then they can receive a local support. Without local support, they cannot survive. So they need local support.
You know, I want to shift for a moment to an issue that I've been really shocked, Elijah, just on a personal level, to see the amount of justification and excuse making for what we witnessed on the coast of Syria over the last 4 or 5 days by the think tankers and the media personalities. I'm talking both at the Gulf state think tanks and Gulf state medias, as well as in the US and the UK. And even, the European Union, I don't know if you saw their statement, but they basically condemned the so-called Assad remnants and didn't say anything about the massacres against civilians. But I've been kind of blown away by the fact that you see these videos. Like, this isn't he said, she said, this is on video. These really disgusting, depraved acts of murder on video of families and children. And then people are justifying it, talking about, Assad remnants and the 4th Division and Maher al-Assad, and just coming up with all these excuses. There was even a video by some NGO that was passing out candy in Syria because they were so happy this happened. I guess that's all to say, like, what I understand what you're saying about locally. There's like this anti-Iran hatred, and they're attaching the idea of Alawites to Iran, and getting rid of them is great for the US. It's great for the Israelis. It's great for these people who ideologically hate Alawites and Shias. But what is with this concerted effort by seemingly the entire mainstream media apparatus and all these think tanks to downplay and even justify these massacres? I don't get it. Like, you don't have to justify them. You can say it's wrong. Like, it's okay to say it's wrong. It's okay. You don't have to spend all day defending Jolani. I guess it's more of just a rhetorical question, but it's just very upsetting. It's very upsetting to watch this attitude take place.
Well, if I look at what Israel is doing in Gaza and I say this is a massacre, I look what HTS, the New Syrian Authority, is doing in the Syrian coast. I cannot call it but massacre. And if I hear what the president, the de facto president, self-proclaimed Ahmed Shara, is saying, that he has formed a committee of 5 judges to look into all the behavior of the security apparatus that belongs to him, it's a confirmation of the massacre. Now, of course, the HTS made a mistake on social media by chewing back video that date back to 2017 or 2015. They didn't need to do that. They really damaged the image of massacre. That is true. You just need to take what the people in the west coast of Syria are doing, what they are saying, the video that they are showing, but take the video that even the HTS members are showing, the special forces who are on camera, take the videos of their supporters who are saying, kill them all, but don't put them on camera. All these are signs and signals of the massacre that occurred, exactly like we speak about what happened to the Palestinians as a massacre in Palestine. It's a massacre of the Alawite on the west coast of Syria. That is undoubtable and should be very clear. Now, how the media is going to deal with it, people will say, oh, have you seen what Assad did? But there's no link. What Assad did. If Assad massacred people, doesn't mean the new president of Syria is giving order to massacre other Syrians. Are the Syrians going to live from one massacre to another? Is one act justify the other with a similar massacre? If the Alawite, if a group of Alawite people attacked police positions and killed 180 or 200 or 300, you don't go into every single house. I've seen people who are Syrian Sunnis standing all their time with Ahmed Shara, living in Idlib, carrying Alawite in the street, protecting them from the killing of the security forces, because this is how Syrians behave. The Syrian don't have this distinction between an Alawite and a Syrian, an Armenian, a Christian, and a Druze. They all live in the same. This is the mosaic of Syria. It is the most ancient country in the world. It's a country where you have Aleppo, you have Damascus, you have Malula, you have such a rich culture and history. People did not look at religion there. It is the people like Ahmed Shara who brought it to Syria in 2011. His boss, Zarqawi, in 2003, brought it to Iraq, where in Iraq people were living without this distinction. So there is no need to go and hunt for old videos that are unrelated to the real massacre that took place in Syria. And even if the international community doesn't want to talk about it, they're not talking about Gaza. So there's no really difference between not talking about this and not talking about that. The problem here is most of the Arabs are talking about the massacre of the Palestinians. But what happened to the Alawite in Syria, the Syrians living in the northwest of Syria, is ignored by many people. Why this distinction? Well, why do we blame the hypocrisy and the double standard of the West?
So I want to, as we wrap up here, Elijah, I want to ask you, I've been talking to friends of mine in Syria and who've recently been in and out of Syria, and they've been reporting to me that the services in Syria have dramatically decreased, including electricity. And even in the capital, Damascus, electricity has actually gotten worse. No one's really clear on why it's gotten worse. Food and other products have become increasingly unaffordable. And I mean, obviously, Syria's economy was already in shatters. It's actually become more difficult for people for probably many reasons that we don't necessarily have to get into. But I guess I say all that to say, looking ahead, you have an economy that's still under sanction. You have people unable to access services even more so than before. You have more violence, whether it's on the coast or even in Damascus. I mean, it's not as bad, obviously, in the capital, but there's been some chaos and instability in the capital as well, with protests and, various shootings, and crime is a little bit higher, these sorts of things. I'm just, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on like an outlook for Syria? What happens next? I mean, do you think we're going to see more massacres? Do you think we're going to see further destabilization? Are we at the beginning of an even darker phase for Syria, or is it possible this was just, one bad moment and things will calm down and it'll get better?
Syria is not going to get better now because the economy needs very wealthy donors willing to reconstruct. Are they going to reconstruct Syria under an unstable regime that they are trying to communicate with now? And they seem wanting to adopt Ahmed al-Shara, and adopt what he's trying to do. Is that enough to convince the donors to invest hundreds of billions of dollars? Syria is in need of $500 billion. There are so many areas that completely destroyed. If you go to Deir ez-Zor, Raqqa, to Al-Bukamal, it's hard to see a house standing there. If you go to many areas in Syria, the reconstruction needs a lot of money. Now, Iran used to bring oil to the country, and the Kurds used to sell some of the oil to Damascus. But now, with the return of the relationship between the Kurds and Damascus, how Damascus is going to pay the share of the Kurds? The Kurds refused to give up on Afrin when Turkey advanced and occupied the area with HTS, because the Kurds, the Central Command and the local authority had $9 billion that was not ready to give up on. Today, the Kurds in Al-Hasaka, in Kamishli, are very rich. They're not going to share the money with Damascus that needs every single penny. Is Qatar going to reconstruct? Is Saudi Arabia going to do that? Well, they're going to reconstruct Syria or Gaza first? What's going to happen? Do they construct south of Lebanon and Dahi? There are areas in the Middle East today, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria, that need to be reconstructed. Where do they start from? The Europeans are investing $800 billion today on rearmament. They spend, with the Americans, more than $300 billion on supporting Ukraine. They will continue supporting Ukraine. Where do they want to spend their money? How much they can invest in Syria? In the light of what happened on the Syrian east coast, there are many countries who are hesitating now, and looking at what's happening in Syria is an indication of a serious instability. They look at what Israel is doing is also a source of instability. They see Iraq is afraid, Lebanon is afraid, Syria is in an unfriendly environment where Lebanon is not happy, Iraq is not happy, Israel not happy, wants some more, and the Syrians are not happy. And then you have a leader who decided to rule them for 4 years, and they got rid of al-Assad, and they got another person with a beard now, but on the same narrative, saying, I want to rule you for 4 years. I appoint my people, not the people with whom he fought with, to take Syria and push and accelerate the fall of Bashar al-Assad. So even he is excluding his own people. So all that doesn't create a very strong image of what's happening, what's going to happen in the future and the future of Syria. And on top of that, he wants to reconcile with 1,200 delegates as a conference with all the people who fought against Assad and have different ideas. He thinks that all these ideas will be gathered in one new constitution, when the constitution is okay. He just needs to implement it. So all that, it doesn't give reassurances for Syria. It doesn't give stability. And above all, they're not dealing with America that is ready to invest. On the contrary, America is out for hunting to take and grab money from the rich country and rich people. And America doesn't have the appetite to go invest in Syria. So I don't see Syria future. The future of Syria is really very positive in the near future.
Well, Elijah, I want to thank you for joining me for the hour and remind everybody that they can follow your excellent reporting at your website, ejmagnier.com, which I follow regularly. I really, really appreciate all the regular updates and the incredible journalism that you do. Thank you so much for joining me to break all this down.
Thank you, Rania. It's really a pleasure.